A few weeks back, we talked about the current state of rookie wide receivers. Now, I want to do the same for the rookie running backs. Now, this class, I think, is much less exciting than the rookie wide receiver class, but we still need to talk through everything we've seen up to this point so far. So let's start at the bottom. And for tier number 4, we're just calling these the other guys. Right now, these running backs feel like they are just destined to just sort of exist in the NFL without a ton of fantasy relevance. At the bottom, I have Isaiah Davis, who actually scores his first touchdown with the Jets last week. But the problem is, he's not the best rookie running back on his own team. Isaiah Davis has basically been a non-existent player up to this point in the season. His 17-game rush yard pace is 31 yards. You don't really need to worry about Isaiah Davis. Maybe in the future, if Breece Hall leaves and Braelon Allen and Isaiah Davis form a 1-2 punch, maybe it matters then. That's probably not the case. After Isaiah Davis, we have Kimani Vidal. And look, and I get there was a lot of hype around him coming into week 1, and he just hasn't really done much, and he's been a healthy scratch for most of the season, fighting for snaps with Hassan Haskins. That's not something that instills a lot of confidence. The only reason he's active again and getting some run is because J.K. Dobbins is now on IR. Gus Edwards is bad. Hassan Haskins also bad. And Kimani Vidal maybe gives them a little bit more pop in the backfield. But his prospects long-term are just not ideal, right? A guy that, they gave him a shot early on in the season that really didn't turn into much. 218-yard pace over 17 games. It's just not all that exciting. I'm not really in on Kimani Vidal long-term. And the last guy in tier 4 that I think is worth mentioning is Audric Estime. And look, admittedly, he could get bumped up to tier 3 by the end of this season, but right now, he's fighting for snaps with Javonte Williams, who has been objectively bad. He's fighting for snaps with Jaleel McLaughlin, who I liked coming into the season, but hasn't been all that productive. Right now, you're not seeing a lot out of Audric Estime. I mean, when you look at what he's done so far, right? On pace for 380 yards over the course of 17 games, 2.5 fantasy points per game. It's all around ugly. A 1% target share. He's not showing he can be a workhorse. They're not trusting him to be a workhorse, and maybe that changes next year. But right now, the best bet is he just kind of is a guy for fantasy that maybe if he lucks into a big workload can give you low-end RB2 numbers, but early returns are not good for Audric Estime. Now, tier 3 is what I'm going to call great handcuffs. Just guys that I think could have a lot of value should they get an opportunity. And this is full of, I think, a large number of names, so I'm not going to touch on all of them. But at the bottom, you have Will Shipley. Look, Saquon Barkley's not ceding any work to anybody, so obviously Will Shipley has not really had a chance. He's behind Kenny Gainwell, but I think that would flip should Barkley go down. I still like Will Shipley as a deep handcuff. After him, you have Marshawn Lloyd. Now, look, we have no data on Marshawn Lloyd, really. He's still out for most of the season. This is basically just a lost year at this point. I think long-term, he's going to be Josh Jacobs' handcuff for the next 2 seasons, maybe 1 to 2 years. And that's fine. Should Jacobs go down, it's a high-powered offense. Marshawn Lloyd has the draft capital and the skill set we liked coming out of college to work, but not seeing a ton to really move him up or down in tiers right now. After Marshawn Lloyd, you have Isaac Guerendo. And look, we're about to get a good look at what Isaac Guerendo can do. And this matters because, look, with Jordan Mason on IR, CMC getting much older and having Achilles issues and all sort of other things that could really drastically change his outlook over the next 2 seasons, Isaac Guerendo may end up being all that more important. The on-field production, right, all the pacing is not great because he's been behind Jordan Mason. He got some run. He was behind CMC for a lot of this too. But now you're going to get a look at him as an actual NFL back. By the end of this little run to the end of the year, he could be in the others group and just, we won't care about Isaac Guerendo moving forward. But right now, there's an opportunity for him to show some excitement, and we've seen him flash already. So I like the appeal of holding on to Isaac Guerendo and seeing what you can get, maybe at the end of the season if he pops off a little bit. Following him, I go to Jaylen Wright. And look, he's been battling with Raheem Mostert for that number 2 job, but we have seen Jaylen Wright look explosive in limited work. Jaylen Wright next season, it's just him and Devon Achane. And admittedly, he may be a better runner, might be a better runner because Achane has been elite as a receiver, hasn't really given us what we wanted on the ground game relative to last season. So maybe you see this become, a 1-2 punch with Jaylen Wright next year. We've seen the pass catching ability. We've seen the explosive ability on the ground. Jaylen Wright has done a lot of really good things. But again, like most of this class, these guys are just buried. I think the next 4 on this list are probably, you want to call, tier 3.A, 3.B, whatever. Like the higher end of tier 3, I think, is much more interesting than the lower end because we've seen these guys play, right? And that leads us to Braelon Allen. Look, Braelon Allen early on in the season seemed like he was actually going to have a relatively large role. Now, that wasn't necessarily the case. He's on pace for, 340 rushing yards, just like most of this class, pulls in a 4% target share, but he's making guys miss, and that's what matters. His yards created per rush, just under 2.5 yards per carry. He has looked good this year when given the ball. He's shown that he can catch the ball. He shows that he can run hard. Should anything happen to Breece Hall down this stretch, Braelon Allen immediately becomes an RB2. He's shown the talent already, and a massive workload in an offense that's just going to funnel the ball to the top player. That could lead to fantasy gold. But again, he is blocked by Breece Hall until that happens, unfortunately. After Braelon Allen, you go to Blake Corum. The reason I really like Blake Corum in this tier is, should anything happen to Kyren Williams, this team is going to hammer Blake Corum with the ball. They are just going to feed him over and over and over. And at long term, look, Blake Corum has a shot to be an RB1. But like everybody else in this damn tier, he's blocked by Kyren Williams, another productive running back. Last week, we got an extended look at Blake Corum for the first time, I feel like, and he showed out well, right? He looked explosive on the ground. He made players miss. The downside was Kyren Williams looked even better. So I don't think there's going to be any changing of the guard anytime soon. This is all going to be baked into injury. Following Blake Corum, we can look at Ray Davis, and Ray Davis has given us some moments. He had a game where he was the lead back with James Cook out, and he popped. That alone gives us a lot of excitement for what Ray Davis could show us in the future. The downside, like everybody else, he's blocked by James Cook. And James Cook right now is the clear one on this offense, and I don't think it's really all that close. Ray Davis has solidified himself as the 2, and should James Cook go down again, look, Ray Davis is an RB1. I don't think that's a crazy statement, but he's the only guy outside of tier 1 and tier 2, which is just 3 names. He's the only player so far that's on pace for over 400 yards rushing this year. This running back class has been bad. Ray Davis looks like a bright spot amongst a flurry of average to mediocre running backs potentially, because we've seen him show it and show it for an extended period, and that's exciting. But again, blocked by James Cook, so we need to see how that shakes out over the next 2 seasons. And to close us out, we have Trey Benson. Now, again, blocked by James Conner, right? Thought if you heard that before. James Conner signs a long-term contract, but Trey Benson, I think, is a good runner. On pace just under 393 yards, 2.8 yards created per carry, so he's explosive, he's making players miss, he's tied to a good offense. Those are the things you want in a handcuff running back. A lot of these guys below that we've talked about, they've looked good in limited time. Does all of that hold up long-term? You don't really know, and that's the downside to just kind of banking on handcuffs. We can be optimistic right now because they haven't really given us a reason to not be optimistic, but I think we all still need to remember these are just handcuffs right now. Now to tier 2, these are, I think, RB2s with high risk, and it's one name and one name only. It is Tyrone Tracy. Tyrone Tracy has looked fantastic. But the problem with Tyrone Tracy is next year, it's not a guarantee he keeps this job. 1, age is going to be a concern because he's already going to be 26 years old next season. That's not great for a second-year running back. 2, it's probably going to be a new coaching staff. And I think we all know the history of day 3 running backs with new coaching staff. He's not a guarantee to keep that job. But if he does, he has given us clear RB2 upside, right? Pulling in a 7.5% target share. He makes guys miss, averaging 2.8 yards created per rush. He's doing the things you want in a running back. If he was tied to a better offense with a coaching staff that was going to stick around, I'd put him in tier 1. I'd feel much more confident. But I think it's enough risk to differentiate between this tier and the next. On pace for over 870 yards. He's productive. He's talented. It all just comes down to what does the next coaching staff think of him? And the problem with today's dynasty landscape is everybody really understands the risk day 3 running backs carry. So I don't know if you can flip him like you would have been able to Dameon Pierce a couple years back. You likely got to hold on Tyrone Tracy or sell low because the optics around him, I think, are going to be pretty dangerous until week 1 of next year. Now to tier 1, call it future RB1 and 2s. Just 2 guys. The bottom of this tier is Jonathon Brooks. Now, it may not have been the name you expected to see there, but that's who I'm going with right now. We haven't seen a ton out of Jonathon Brooks. He's just coming back from an ACL tear. This year has essentially been a lost year. A lot of us anticipated he'd be back week 5, week 6. We just anticipated that based off of the history of other running backs. That was not the case for Jonathon Brooks, obviously. We've seen him basically in a non-existent role so far. He's caught a couple of passes last week that were exciting, but we're really still just going off of that pre-draft evaluation, the second-round draft capital, the things we want to see. The shift in situation is obviously not ideal. If you don't know what I'm talking about, Hubbard gets an extension that gives him some, high-level competition for the entirety of his rookie deal, but I'm still going to bank on Dave Canales making the right decision to eventually, what I consider the right thing, it's just playing the better running back that you invested a second-round draft pick in. So we'll see how that shakes out. I still like Jonathon Brooks a lot. But at the top of tier 1, there is no denying it. It is Bucky Irving. And that feels insane to say about a day 3 running back, and maybe that speaks to how this class is shaking out so far. But Bucky Irving, averaging over 14 points per game with a 9% target share, near the top of the NFL in yards created per carry, yards created per touch, basically everything you want to see, Bucky Irving has shown us. At this point, I don't care that he's a day 3 running back, and that may bite me in the ass in 12 months, but Bucky Irving has proven he is a freakishly talented running back. The combine did not match the tape. I think it's something we talked about early on this season in a Rookie Risers video where Bucky Irving just looked good. He was my hot take to basically be the reason Rachaad White wasn't an RB1 this year. Maybe not because of the pass game, but I expected it on the ground. And that's what he's shown us. And he's given us a ton through the air as well. Next season, look, this coaching staff is going to stick around for the most part. Baker Mayfield's going to be there. Rachaad White will still be there. But it looks like this is just trending towards Bucky Irving coming off of a monster game against Carolina. He's probably an RB1 the rest of the way for this season. And look, all offseason, people are going to argue about him being a day 3 running back. I will not partake. I am just accepting that he's good. And I think you should do the same. Bucky Irving, while he may not be an RB1 for Dynasty, has proven he is a valuable asset to have because, look, the kid's talented and he's producing. You can't ask for much else.